and to discuss the battle between Russia and Ukraine, particularly in the Kursk region, the latest Kursk incursion by Ukraine, and that was started on the 6th of August, and prospects of peace, if any. We are being joined by Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. He is former Director General Infantry. Such a pleasure to have you on DD India. How do you look at the battle as it stands as of now? General Kulkarni, also, is Ukraine ready for a resolution? Both sides, in fact, because both sides seem to have paid a heavy price for the conflict over the last 2.5 years, but neither side seem to be ready to make big moves for peace. Some say they may be tired but not exhausted. One of the conditions, perhaps, for peace negotiations.
Thank you very much. I think you are absolutely right. Probably Ukraine is looking for a negotiation, and that was one of the reasons why this Kursk offensive can be seen in that context, because even much that Ukraine has been supplied with weapons of like HIMARS and all to be able to counter the Russian offensive. But despite that, of course, Russia also feels that if it hadn't been for the kind of equipment that Ukraine has got, this offensive would have possibly gone in, as Russians seem to have lost about 1,000 square kilometers for the first time after Second World War. And the Ukrainians are not seeing that as a great victory, but forcing the Russians for a negotiation. And that probably seems that there is possibly some kind of work going on, where the Russians also are looking for a ceasefire, which is a negotiable kind of a thing, which the Russians always wanted it from Ukraine, but Russians believe that Ukraine was being held and being pushed into this offensive against Russia. So I see it in that context that though the Ukrainians have succeeded in going about gaining about 1,000 square kilometers of the Russian territory in the Kursk and the way they've gone about it, but yes, that is not, the Ukrainians don't see it as a big victory as much as they seem to feel they may be able to force Russians into negotiations and some whatever relief that they might get in the Donbass region. It is in that context I see this offensive of the Ukrainians and Russia.
Yeah. Also, General Kulkarni, we heard from the Ministry of External Affairs today, and it said that the ongoing conflict is going to be discussed during Prime Minister's upcoming visit to Ukraine, and it also said that India has maintained the stand that diplomacy and dialogue is the only way forward for lasting peace. It referred to how India had participated in the Switzerland peace talks, and that going forward it wants both sides to sit across the table and talk peace, something which we had not seen in the Switzerland peace talks. So do you think that there is an opportunity here for the international community to once again come together to find some sort of prospect for peace?
See, India has always believed, like what the Prime Minister always said, that this isn't an era of war, and you can't have peace, with a gun pointing to your head. So it is, all these kind of things are definitely, diplomacy has to be there. Dialogue and diplomacy alone can succeed in bringing in peace in this region. India has always had excellent relations with Ukraine and also with Russia. There is no denying the fact. This, of course, is a very historic visit, because I think almost after 30 years that the Indian Prime Minister would be visiting Ukraine, and at a time when there have been quite a few of Ukrainian visits also to India, their foreign ministers, the deputy ministers coming in. It looks like that, yes, they feel that since India has had very good relations with Ukraine, you had about 18,000 students studying there, all of them with Ganga, we were able to get back to India, all with the support of Ukraine, Poland, Russia, all of it. So we have excellent relations, and that is why the Prime Minister's visit in consonant with the visit to Poland, which is again historic, almost after 40 years there, 30 years here, is indicative that yes, there is something. I wouldn't say that the Prime Minister's visit is primarily to be able to do, but why not? Since he maintains very good relations with Mr. Zelensky, he's been meeting Mr. Zelensky on and off on many international forums, and he also has a lot of hope. He also feels that, yes, India's Prime Minister has excellent relations with Mr. Putin. If something worthwhile could come through, because Ukraine also seems to feel that enough is enough now, if something worthwhile. And as I said, even the offensive, probably Ukraine sees it as an excellent way to look forward for negotiating with Russia. Russia also seems to feel that, yeah, why not? They've always been saying if they are not if Ukraine is not influenced by the West, negotiations with Ukraine are always welcome. In that context, yes, but we should hope that it is only with that in view that to be able to solve. But definitely, at a time like this, when there's a war on since February 2022, it's been a long time. There's a war over 906 odd days it's been on. If the Prime Minister can help and can facilitate, can carry, because he's met Mr. Putin, he's met Mr. Zelensky, and in that context, now that he's going to be visiting Ukraine, meeting Mr. Zelensky at his invitation on the 23rd of August, I look forward, if things can be peaceful, if Russia and Ukraine can sort of come to peace on the negotiating table, I think it will be a huge difference that will make to the world, because the world is also now undergoing, now the economic crisis can be seen all over the world, be it in oil, be it in gas, be it in inflation, and of course the relations, unnecessarily polarization of the world takes place. So in that context, I think our Prime Minister's visit, when both the leaders, Mr. Zelensky, as also Mr. Putin, hold him at very high esteem, and he has good relations with both. India has excellent relations with Ukraine before this, and even now, the kind of 135 tons of humanitarian assistance that we've given to Ukraine. After, despite all those so many students come back, I understand there are yet another about 1,000 students who have gone back to Ukraine to continue with their studies, is indicative that there's a lot of goodwill that exists between Ukraine and India, and I'm quite hopeful that something worthwhile will come. Oh, maybe after the visit, we will really get to know what has happened after the visit of the Prime Minister to Ukraine, which is historic by all means, because it's after 30 years the diplomatic relations established between Ukraine and India that the Prime Minister of India will be visiting, and at a time when Ukraine and Russia are at war.
And you've heard from the Prime Minister before on how this is not the era of war and solutions cannot be found in the battlefield. Having said that, what role could US play going forward? Could Moscow and Kiev want to see the outcome of the US elections, a major variable shaping war and peace in Ukraine, before they seal a peace deal, if at all?
See, the Republicans have always believed, and Mr. Trump has always believed, and he said it very clearly, that the NATO countries must give 2% of the GDP contributing towards the NATO military expenditure, because he was very, very clear that they cannot possibly be, living off what the United States does and fire their guns from the US shoulders. In that context, yes, the Ukrainians, though, should the Republicans come to power, and with Mr. Trump as president, he is going to be telling Zelensky no more. The Republicans also have reasonably good relations with Russia, with, of course, the Democrats all out to stand for Zelensky, irrespective of whatever happens. And we've seen it for over now 906 days, the kind of support that has been given to Ukraine. But yes, if there's a change in USA, and if Mr. Trump comes back, probably I would see that the war will end. And the only way it can end, as I again see, it would be West Ukraine and East Ukraine, the whole country being divided. But there would peace prevail, as it did after Second World War, when Germany was divided into West Germany and East Germany, and something to that effect. But yes, Ukraine is on a, they would be quite happy to have the Democrats, because the Republican, and especially Mr. Trump, has very clearly said that this kind of aid which is flowing to Ukraine and at the cost of the American economy is not acceptable to the Republicans. So in that context, I think, yes, these elections are very important for Ukraine.
General Kulkarni, what do you make at the same time of Europe's internal divisions on how to deal with the Russian question? Because two historically neutral countries, Finland and Sweden, have joined NATO amid their growing sense of threat from Russia. Also, two NATO members, Hungary and Turkey, have sought to pursue their own paths to dealing with the Ukraine war. And many European parties on both left and right are in favor of a compromise with Russia.
See, definitely, with Finland, Sweden, the number of NATO countries turned 13 number. So there is that little pressure, and they have been staying neutral. With Turkey, of course, the grain deal which came along with Russia was a great, I would say, a boon to most of the countries, especially Africa. Well, the grain deal has now got abrogated. But notwithstanding that, I think there is a little bit of, Turkey is looking at it now. Some kind of rumors come from Turkey that they are also looking at wanting to give away the S-400, because there has been pressure on Turkey for having supported the Russians and having got that, and they don't seem now very comfortable with it. So there is a lot internal this thing, because countries are there which feel that yes, the war must end. There are countries which are in support of Russia slowly and steadily, because the economy, all said and done, the economies are being badly affected. We can't carry on supporting a war in Ukraine with billions and billions of dollars and going nowhere, because except for this small little Kursk offensive, wherein the Ukrainians have managed about 1,000 square kilometers, it's been on for so many, almost 900 plus days. And what has it been? It has been total ruin for the, for Ukraine, and especially the eastern Ukraine, almost finished. And with that in mind, I think slowly and steadily, even amongst the Europeans, there is a little bit of pressure on Ukraine to end the war, because boots on ground for Ukraine seem a little difficult, though the military arsenal is definitely being provided, but boots on ground is difficult, and the Russians are able to keep the offensive going, which again, with the kind of polarization, you see the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians,
Yes.
all getting on one side, the Americans wanting to push as much as they can, with Israel also now, with Hamas getting into a little more broil with Iranians and the Israeli kind of tensions that are building up. So obviously, everybody wants that the war must end, and therefore, in that context, as I see, there is polarization even amongst the European Union, and definitely with countries like Turkey and Finland, Sweden, were neighbors and have been at peace with Russia, would much want that there is peace prevailing over there.
Right. Thank you, General Kulkarni, for joining us and sharing your views on the ongoing battle between Russia and Ukraine, and whether peace really stands a chance in the weeks to come.